Hey everybody, raise your hand if you think life is pretty okay. Wow, that looks good. That looks good. Here's the thing. That is exactly my point, When life is good, people want to get together. They want to connect with each other. They want to share emotions. They want to go out and celebrate life. But then, why is it that when someone's life comes to an end, that suddenly we can't seem to find the words to comfort each other? Suddenly, the only thing we see is walls appearing. Even best friends don't even find the words to be there for each other. Sometimes they don't even get any further than just sincere condolences or something. Like, let me tell you about a friend of mine. His name is Robbie. Here he is. Say cheers to Robbie. Here, Robbie. So, as kids, Robbie and me, we were each in a band. We played music. And I would be like the pop music kind of guy with my band called the Zinger. And Robbie, he would definitely be the ultimate rock and roll animal superhero kind of guy. And, torn jeans, leather jacket. I guess you can imagine how he looks like. And then every time he went to see a band play, he would say something like, yeah, these guys, they're not bad, but what's with the synthesizers? I want to hear more guitars. So that was Robbie, just this rock and roll animal. And then there was this big festival. And Robbie had managed to get behind the security lines. And he waited until the very last show was over in the festival tent. And suddenly, when everyone was gone and the tent was completely empty, he jumped on stage and he greeted his imaginary crowd. Something like this. I can hear you. Something like that. And then he would, he took this imaginary microphone. He was like, yeah. He said something like, one day I'm gonna rock all your asses. So he was one of a kind, Robbie is this great guy. And then it was his birthday. And there was this crazy party, and they partied until, 6 a.m., and they drove back home. And then suddenly, the car he was in missed a turn, and they crashed into a house. At that time, that day, myself, I was in the studio recording some new songs with my band. And when I heard that, that Robbie hadn't survived the crash, we just immediately canceled the whole recording session because, none of this made any sense to us. And I even quit making music myself because just nothing would come out anymore. It was only 2 years later that I suddenly felt like grabbing my guitar and, strumming some chords. And suddenly this Robbie song popped up out of the deep, dark blue. And I called it Grace. And then everybody's dying these days because, in that period, a lot of kids in my hometown had just passed away suddenly. It was a pretty dark age at that time. And then the 1st of November was coming closer. Most of you will know that the 1st of November is the day of All Saints. That is when people go to the cemetery to, pay their respects to the people that they have lost. And the crazy thing was, nothing was happening. No one seemed to be making any kind of plan to get together around Robbie, at the cemetery, do something. You see, where I live, people don't really talk about death. It's not really Instagram material, is it? So There are so many beautiful cultures around the world that have these beautiful grieving traditions. I'm thinking of New Orleans funeral jazz. I'm thinking of Mexico's Dia de los Muertos. But where I live, and I think this might apply to you as well, there is no grieving culture. There are no sounds, no images, no stories that are connected to death in our collective memory. You know, back in the days, in the 1950s, there would be like a brass band playing at a funeral. But that's a long time ago. People have stopped doing that. And I thought that was, a pity. You could even say that our grieving culture is somewhat a kind of wasteland. And the cool thing about wastelands is that you can also see them as white sheets. So I thought maybe I should go out and, play the Robbie song for Robbie on the 1st of November. But then again, I was terrified of, hurting people's feelings by just, disturbing the peace and quiet on the cemetery. Because in Belgium, cemeteries, if you go there, everything's quiet. You could hear, some cars passing by. You could hear the wind blow. And maybe you could see some people minding their own business. So I asked a couple of friends what they thought about the idea. And everyone said the same thing. They said, Peter, you're a great guy. You're a friend, and I respect you. And as a friend, I have to be honest here with you. I was like, yeah. And they said all the same thing. Peter, music at a cemetery? That sounds pretty disrespectful. But in my mind, playing the Robbie song to Robbie sounded like the most respectful thing I could ever imagine doing for him. As long as I had made sure that my guitar amp was turned way too loud. So, there I was, at the cemetery. I was all shaking, my knees were shaking. I was scared to death, literally, because I was so afraid of people's reactions. So I started strumming my first G major. Lonesome driver, where have you been? Dreaming your heart out, ain't it a sin? Fear and changes, but grace got her way. Have you heard everybody is dying these days? Grace tumbles and fate crumbles, you see, and everything reminds me of you. I could not feel it, I was reeling, and everything reminds me of you. Lonesome driver, found on the floor, growing root after root, as if you cannot be torn. You say it is not fair, whoever said it was, as if you're in the right position to negotiate with grace tumbles and fate crumbles, you see, and everything reminds me of you. I couldn't feel it. I was reeling, and everything reminds me of you. Who do you think you're fooling now? And everything reminds me of you. Who do you think you're fooling now? Everything reminds me of you. You keep me awake, dreaming out loud, a sucker punch love, lost in a crowd. Keep me awake, dreaming out loud, a sucker punch love, lost in a crowd. And you know, people actually did react, but in such a breathtakingly warm way. And there was this person, his name was Milo. He was in his 60s, and he said that he had never been to the cemetery ever since his son had passed away 10 years ago. And he said, you know, what happened here has just made me, feel it again. And to me, this is something new, okay? I feel at ease again at the cemetery. And he said, hey, can I join your team? I thought, yeah, great, that'd be awesome. You just thought, wait a minute, I don't have a team. Because I never thought that I was ever going to need a team for what I had just done. Turned out, I actually needed a team. So we got together and we did some brainstorming. We called this thing Reveille, which means revival in my language, which is the same as, bringing things back to life. And sure, it did spread, because in 2014, that was just me over there, you see. And the year after, Reveille spread its wings over like 20 cities, and then it was 50 and 70. And last year, on the 1st of November, there were 100 cities in Flanders where people commemorated their beloved ones with music, with poetry, with stories, with dance, with art. And suddenly I realized that I had this huge team of artists and singer-songwriters and brass bands. And I think that these guys are all ready to cross the borders. So I think, ladies and gentlemen, that everyone in this room has ever lost someone. Or if you haven't, you will lose people. Okay, you just will. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry to tell you that. But if we have to lose people, then I do believe that it's a good thing to do it in a constructive, positive, creative way. And throughout my journey with grief, I've learned a couple of keys. First one is, we definitely should start seeing cemeteries not as crazy, spooky places, but as warm collections of the most beautiful stories that form our cities, that form the roots of, what we're doing right now. Second thing is, I believe that we should see commemoration as a celebration of life. Try and collect memories, because remembering is not the same as just not forgetting. And I also do believe, last but not least, that we should do it together in a creative way with illustration, with music, with dance, with poetry, with stories. Let's grieve together. Thank you.